Hello and welcome back to another episode of Guy and Brodeur. One voice, two minds. I'm your host, Guy, and today we're talking all about taking ownership. That's right. As always on these episodes, I will be circling back with the one, the only Brodeur of Brodeurland, Mr. Brodeur. Hey, Guy. Hey, everybody. And that's right. Today, we're moving on forward and we're talking about taking ownership. And a couple things I really want to dive into taking ownership, Guy, is, I think a lot of times we think about taking ownership is all about, take ownership of our mistakes, right? But we're going to talk about how you can also take ownership of those successes. Interesting, Mr. Brodeur. All right, I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, Guy. And also, I'm really looking forward to talking a little bit more of some of my childhood and my dad, because when I think about taking ownership, I really think about some of the things I've talked about in my previous podcast episodes with you about my dad, his quote, "in other layers." So I'm excited to really dive on in. I don't know about you, Guy, but taking ownership is really near and dear to my heart, one of my favorites of all the words of the week. So anyways, let me hand it over to you, Guy, so we can get this show rolling. Sure thing, Mr. Brodeur. So yeah, I'm ready to slice things up, especially with this taking ownership idea and phrase or word of the week or whatever you want to call it. So let's jump on in, Mr. Brodeur. And so the first question we're going to start with, and if you've been following us through all of our different podcast episodes, we always try to start with the definition. So, Mr. Brodeur, what does it mean to take ownership? Sure thing, Guy. So for me, when I think about the definition for taking ownership, I first think about this. You gotta be accepting of the responsibilities for your actions and those outcomes that come from those actions. Control what you can control, and you gotta be fully accountable for those outcomes, whether those outcomes are exactly the way you planned them, pretty much successes, right? Or maybe not, those failures. So first, when I look at this definition that I just kind of talked through right here, I always think the most important element, and hopefully what you get throughout today's conversation between Guy and myself, is that it's all about taking responsibility for our actions, or better yet, the accountability piece. See, you have to be accountable and admit what you did. And that's not just about our mistakes. Like I kind of hinted toward a little bit earlier, it's also about, can I be accountable? Can I take responsibility for those successes? Most people might think this is all about taking ownership and responsibility for failures. And of course, that's hard to do. It's not an easy thing to reflect on your mistakes, really take ownership, responsibility, and it's important. But you also need to own up on those successes so you can learn from those successes as well and keep repeating them. And hopefully not just repeating them, but pushing the limit forward and growing beyond that. Mr. Brodeur, I really like how you mentioned this accountability word. When you said that, I felt like a light bulb just went off in my head about taking ownership. We have to be accountable. And like you said, not only for our mistakes, but I like what you said, also for our successes. Yeah, and that's right, Guy. And my dad was a big part in my taking ownership of my life, right? I mentioned this in the Brodeurland Origins episode, but I'll share it again since it pertains to taking ownership. My dad would always say this quote to me growing up, and it goes like this: "Losers make excuses, winners find a way." My dad said this all the time when I was growing up. Anytime I would complain, anytime things did not go my way, I would tell my dad, "All right, you're being too much. Enough with the quote. I get it. Losers make excuses." Okay, that's just how it was growing up. But I would always come home, and complain about this teacher or marching band, because I was in marching band, or maybe life was just unfair, right? The typical life's not fair. And all he had to say was this quote. And he said it enough that even today, when I hear myself complain, I stop and I say enough with the excuses, right? Enough with them. It's time to find solutions. And look, I'm even talking about it on these podcast episodes. So clearly this quote really stuck in me and has grown with me as I've gotten older. Yes, Mr. Brodeur, clearly, because I love this quote too. And I love that you reshared it and tied it in with taking ownership. And I really, like I said, love it. And it's short and simple and sweet and pretty basic, but it gets the point across. And it makes me think, Mr. Brodeur, about press conferences after a big sports game, right? A Super Bowl, NBA Finals, whatever you want to call, right? And the losers tend to make excuses, or they tend to go and blame it on the refs or something like that. But I always think back and I go, those winners, they always share their way. They always had a strategy or a way to overcome adversity or win the game. That's right, Pie Guy. And an example of my dad really fostering and teaching me to take ownership was when I was making a big time decision. And in this case, it was when I was buying my house. See, I'd been out of college for maybe a little over half of a year, so somewhere around there. And I was house hunting for a month, just to I was renting, and I was thinking, okay, can I afford a house? Can I not? Just kind of looking at the market. And so anyways, the prices were really good at the houses at that time. And I said, hey, Dad, you want to come out? I think I'm looking at a couple more houses. And so my dad was with me, and that happened to be the day I put a contract on the house that I bought and I'm still living in and with my family and my kids. And we went around to some houses, right? I've seen some of them I hadn't seen, and I was really excited to see for the first time. And then we came to the one, right? But here's the deal. My dad would not tell me whether I needed to buy the house, put a contract on it, or not. Wait a minute, Mr. Brodeur. I thought you brought your dad along for the ride to give you advice and maybe be moral support, right? Or, kind of that wisdom. And that's what I thought too, Pie Guy. But this is what I loved about my dad during this time. I remember I was walking around the house going, gosh, this is a steal. Like this house, what I learned is they dropped the price because the person that was selling it had under contract. It fell through. And then they were at that point, they had already moved out. They had already got their second house. And they were like, no, we've got to sell this. So they just dropped the price just to get it off. So I definitely swung in at a good time. But he wanted me to make the decision on my own. He wanted me to control what I can control and own my choices, right? The funny thing is, we were sitting down after I did all the paperwork. We went to the realtor's house, finalized everything, put everything under contract. And he said, okay, it's late. We haven't really eaten. Let's go. And so we went to the Irish Bread Pub right there on the square in Carrollton. And we were talking, and he stopped and he said, I think you made a good choice. And I remember thinking, now you tell me? You couldn't have told me in the moment, Dad. I was sweating this all out, thinking maybe this isn't the right choice. You're making a big purchase, all that stuff. But here's the deal, Pie Guy. I appreciate it now, what he was trying to do all that time growing up. And even in that moment, right? I might have not understood it at the moment, but reflecting back, I definitely do. Because when I find myself in situations and I need to think through solutions, I remind myself not to make excuses, but I got to find that way. And I have to think about it, right? I have to own my choices and I've got to grow from them. Mr. Brodeur, I love that story about how your dad would not tell you if you made the right decision on the house until everything was final. He really was teaching you the importance of making your own choices and I guess owning them, right? Also, you could say he didn't want you to use him, I guess, as an excuse if things went south on the house. That's true, Pie Guy. And he was trying to eliminate the excuses and teach me, if I'm just speaking how I feel, to own up on my choices, right? And you see, taking ownership can unlock our potential. when you reflect on a success or a failure and you have to find alternative ways, you have to tap into your creativity, that determination, that perseverance, right, to achieve those goals. The key is it starts with you. So you've got to go out. You got to take responsibility of the good and, you know what, of the bad. And, you know, that makes me think of this quote right here by Jack Canfield. And it goes like this. If you want to be successful, you have to take 100% responsibility. Taking ownership, achieving those goals, right? It starts with us. And I like in that quote, it says, you got to take 100% responsibility. Not 99, not 50%, 100%. Yes, I love it, Mr. Brodeur. This idea of responsibility, and again, this accountability, I feel like that is the core of what you have been talking about today. But man, I'm going to be honest with you. It's hard at times to really be accountable, to really tap into those mistakes and really take ownership and own up to it. Yeah, Pie Guy, and we have to be honest with ourselves, right? With successes, you got to ask, okay, why did this success happen? Can I repeat it? And that's easier usually because you don't have the pain of that disappointment. But here's the deal. People tend to be lazy with successes and they don't reflect back on them. Sometimes we get in this, hey, I succeeded. Yeah, I hit my goal. But then we get lazy and we can't repeat that success. Or we're like a one and done. And that's what you don't want to do, right? Own that success, learn from it, repeat it, and try to get better. Now, the harder part for most of us is, can I be honest with myself? Here's the deal. When things go wrong, don't sugarcoat things. Don't throw those excuses. Own those mistakes. Ask what went wrong. Use that for fuel to ignite your flame, right? To move forward, to see how far you can turn things around. You know, for me, I think about an example where I made a misjudgment or a failure one year when I was working at the church with the youth group. Uh-oh, Mr. Brodeur. Here we go. It's share time. Tell us, where did you fail? All right, Pie Guy, hold your horses. Like I shared in a previous podcast episode, I talked about the junior high youth group. It was growing, and that group needed to move to the church hall. It really needed to get to an open spot, right? Here's the problem, though, and I didn't really mention this in the other podcast. With that move, the high school youth group also met at the same time on Wednesdays in that church hall. So I had to move the high school youth group. And so I thought, okay, I'll move it to Sunday, late afternoon after the church services, or in the Catholic faith, we call the Mass, right? Once all the Masses were done, we'll do a high school youth group right there after that last Mass. So long story short, I did that. The year started and the attendance really dropped. I never really reached out to people and really asked their opinions. I just made this decision to make all the programs balanced, right? To make sure they all had the same amount of time. I wasn't hurting any program by shortening the time, but I really didn't reach out. I was just trying to make what in my mind looked good on paper, but didn't really tap into the human side, right? So by December, I knew I needed to work on high school youth group. So far, all the other programs were working. Junior high youth group was really succeeding. So I thought, okay, what do I got to do? I put out a survey, and of course, I already predicted it. Most people asked for it to be moved back to Wednesday. So I said, all right, I got to make the switch. I got to make the fix. So for the rest of the year, I did a type of rotation where one Wednesday we would do high school youth group. The next Wednesday we would do junior high youth group, and just kind of go back and forth till the end of the year, right? And I had to own my mistake and figure out, how do I fix this solution? And I had to take 100% responsibility, right? And that's hard. And I realized too, going back to last week's podcast episode, all about cooperation, collaboration, here, I didn't really use that. And this is where taking ownership, understanding I got to collaborate with others when I'm trying to make that decision is all important. And again, hopefully this is also a reminder to everybody out there that these words really work together. I can't just take ownership and ignore all the other words we've talked about. I got to be able to collaborate, maybe with the people around me. What did you see from the outside in when I made this decision, when I made this mistake, when I did this success, right? All of this really works together. So keep that in mind the more we go through each of these words. They're all connected. We can use them to keep growing and become better. Well, thank you, Mr. Brodeur, for sharing with us all that you talked about, especially, I know it's not easy to share about failures, but I love how you can be real and vulnerable with us. So hopefully we can gain some insight and learn from your experiences. Yeah, Pie Guy, it's not easy to talk about failures, but like you said, I'm hopeful that everyone listening can learn the importance of really reflecting back and owning our successes and, of course, our mistakes. Well, Mr. Brodeur, before we have to go, I always like to ask, is there anything else you would like to share with us today on taking ownership? Yes, Pie Guy, as I try to sum up today on taking ownership, I think of Dwayne Johnson, or some people know him as Dwayne The Rock Johnson, right? And he has this quote that I really love, and it goes like this: all success begins with self-discipline. It starts with you. So that's his quote, and I love it because you got to accept your current circumstances and find those solutions and ways to march forward and achieve those dreams. See, here's something I want everybody to remember. Your current circumstances don't determine your future. Where you are right now does not determine where you're going to go. It just shows you where your starting point is. So wherever you are at, whether you feel like you got a head start or you didn't, it's just your starting point. You can keep moving forward. You can keep working. Sure, maybe your current circumstances mean you got to work a little bit harder, play a little bit of catch up, but that's okay. You can still get to that dream. You can still get to that goal. Do you have that self-discipline to see it through? And we're going to dive a little bit more, well, not a little bit, a lot more into self-discipline more in a later podcast episode, because self-discipline is one of my words of the week I really want to talk about. But in general, self-discipline is the ability to do what you should do even when you don't feel like doing it. So here's the deal for everybody. It's choice time. Are you going to accept the change you need to move forward? Are you going to accept some change? No change. It's your choice. But you can't have any more excuses. You got to accept, and you got to fight through the grit, the challenges that you are going to face to achieve that success you are trying to achieve. So ask the question, what does taking ownership look like in my life? Don't make excuses. Find the ways. Find the solutions. Be creative to achieve that success, because here's the deal. It starts with you. Be accountable. Take that responsibility. Do you have that self-discipline? Do you have that grit? Do you have that resilience, that perseverance to get started, to keep moving forward? Pie-tacular, Mr. Brodeur. Thanks again. And I really love what you shared here with taking ownership. The accountability piece. Being 100%, right? Being 100% responsible for not only our successes, but our mistakes. Awesome, awesome. So, like always, everybody, I hope you enjoyed our conversation in this podcast episode today. So, I'm going to sign off like I always do and remind you, stay infinite, my friends. And Mr. Brodeur, you send us off in style. Sure thing, Pie Guy. So always remember, y'all make each day a special day by just you being you. There's no one in the whole world like you except you, and we would like you just the way you truly are. It's good that you exist, but here's the deal. You got to go out there. You got to be accountable. You got to take responsibilities for those mistakes and those successes so you can take ownership of your life and become that best version of yourself. So until next time, Broder out. Peace.